The Galactic Concordance had many rules, approximately 7,362 of them, to be precise. Not that anyone actually read them all. Most were written in a bureaucratic language so dense it could deflect small-caliber weapons, which was, ironically, more useful than the regulations themselves. Among these countless regulations, one fundamental misunderstanding persisted across countless species: the concept of military retirement. To most galactic civilizations, retirement meant a graceful exit, a systematic removal of potential combat resources, a neat filing away of experienced warriors into data archives and pension systems, a process of gentle obsolescence, if you will. Humans, as usual, didn't get the memo. The Zakharal hegemony, a sprawling interstellar administrative nightmare spanning 3 galactic sectors, had long considered themselves masters of military resource management. Their bureaucratic approach to warfare was a thing of mathematical precision, each soldier calculated, categorized, and eventually decommissioned with the clinical efficiency of a computational algorithm. When humans first entered the galactic stage, they were initially categorized as a developing species with moderate technological potential. The diplomatic reports were filled with patronizing observations, primitive rocket technology, rudimentary energy weapons, and a social structure that seemed perpetually on the brink of self-destruction. The Zakharal Diplomatic Corps wrote extensive reports detailing humanity's apparent limitations. They were, of course, spectacularly wrong. What the Zakharal failed to understand was that human retirement wasn't an end. It was merely a change of context. Where most species saw the conclusion of a military career as a time for relaxation, humans viewed it as a reallocation of resources, specifically resources that no longer required official permission or oversight. The first hint of this fundamental misunderstanding came during a routine diplomatic assessment. A team of Zakharal bureaucratic analysts had been tasked with studying human veteran populations, expecting to find a docile group of aged warriors slowly deteriorating into irrelevance. Instead, they found something else entirely. Training facilities that looked like peaceful community centers were, in reality, advanced combat simulation complexes. Recreational centers housed what could only be described as weapon development workshops. Retirement communities were, quite frankly, terrifyingly well-organized martial training grounds. The human concept of retirement wasn't about stopping, it was about changing the rules of engagement. Consider the statistical anomalies. While most galactic species saw a 97% reduction in combat readiness after military service, human veterans demonstrated a peculiar tendency to maintain, and often enhance, their operational capabilities. Fitness levels didn't decline, they transformed. Technical skills didn't fade, they evolved. What other species considered the twilight of a martial career, humans saw as a new dawn of strategic potential. The Zakharal data analysts spent months compiling reports, their translation matrices working overtime to comprehend the sheer improbability of human veteran ecosystems. Fitness centers that looked like casual gathering spaces were, in fact, advanced physical conditioning environments. Community workshops were essentially guerrilla engineering labs. What appeared to be leisurely activities were, in truth, sophisticated methods of maintaining combat readiness. Most intriguingly, these veterans didn't require formal military infrastructure to remain lethal. They created their own networks, their own support systems, their own method of continuous adaptation. Where other species saw retirement as a terminal state, humans saw it as a transitional phase. The first warning signs should have been obvious, but bureaucracies, by their very nature, are remarkably adept at missing the most glaring of indicators. The Zakharal were about to learn a painful lesson about underestimating a species that considered retirement not as an ending, but as a very interesting beginning. The incident that would later be diplomatically referred to as the quantum logistics misunderstanding, began with something as mundane as a supply chain optimization report. In the vast machinery of galactic bureaucracy, such documents were typically the sedatives of administrative communication, dense, dry, and guaranteed to induce immediate intellectual narcolepsy. This particular report, however, was different. It originated from a seemingly innocuous human veteran-owned logistics company that had secured a minor contract with the Zakharal hegemony's tertiary supply division. On the surface, it appeared to be a standard corporate proposal: optimize shipping routes, reduce energy consumption, improve delivery times, the kind of document that would typically be rubber-stamped by mid-level bureaucrats, more interested in their next nutrient break than actual content. What the Zakharal failed to realize was that logistics optimization, in human veteran parlance, was a euphemism that roughly translated to, "We found 17 different ways to weaponize a shipping container." The proposal came with meticulous datasets, algorithmic projections, and efficiency metrics that seemed at first glance to be nothing more than standard corporate analysis. Zakharal analysts spent weeks passing through the documentation, their multi-chambered brains struggling to comprehend the layers of information. Hidden within the seemingly innocuous report were infrastructural vulnerabilities, so precise, so elegantly mapped, that they could only have been compiled by individuals with extensive military backgrounds. Each optimization suggestion was a potential exploit, a point not just for shipping, but for strategic positioning. Consider the shipping route modifications. What appeared to be simple geographic adjustments were, in reality, a masterclass in potential military positioning. Alternative routes weren't just about saving fuel, they were about creating strategic corridors that could be rapidly converted into supply lines or invasion paths. The veterans who compiled this report hadn't just suggested improvements, they had essentially provided a comprehensive playbook for military logistics that could be activated at a moment's notice. Most galactic species viewed corporate work as a complete departure from military thinking. Humans saw it as another operational theater. The Zakharal diplomatic corps, in their infinite wisdom, initially interpreted the report as a standard business proposal. They approved it with the same enthusiasm one might approve a request for additional data storage, which is to say, with minimal attention and maximum bureaucratic indifference. Their first mistake. The human veterans who submitted the proposal weren't just logistics experts. They were strategic architects who had transformed corporate infrastructure into a potential war machine. Every recommendation was a chess move, every efficiency metric a potential tactical advantage. What made human veterans truly terrifying was their ability to see potential where others saw only the mundane. A shipping container wasn't just a container, it was a potential mobile command center. A logistics algorithm wasn't just about moving goods, it was a blueprint for rapid deployment. The Zakharal would soon learn that, for these veterans, retirement wasn't a cessation of military thinking, it was its most dangerous evolutionary stage. When the first anomalies appeared in the implemented logistics system, the Zakharal bureaucracy was, predictably, slow to respond. Minor shipping delays, slight route alterations, seemingly insignificant equipment repositioning, each a thread in a larger, more complex tapestry that the veterans were quietly weaving. They were preparing something, and the Zakharal, for all their computational sophistication, were woefully unaware of the storm gathering on their administrative horizon. Retirement, for these humans, was turning out to be their most active posting yet. Escalation, in the grand tapestry of interstellar conflict, is rarely a sudden explosion. It's more often a meticulously crafted symphony of incremental provocations, each note carefully tuned to push boundaries without triggering immediate retaliation. The human veterans were virtuosos of this particular art form. The Zakharal hegemony's initial response was, predictably, bureaucratic. They convened a standard-issue investigative committee, a gathering so monumentally inefficient it could turn decisiveness into a form of quantum uncertainty. 17 different subcommittees were formed, each with its own color-coded data management system, cross-reference communication protocols, and a Byzantine organizational chart that looked more like a mathematical proof than an actual decision-making structure. While the Zakharal debated, the veterans acted. The logistics optimization was merely the opening movement of a far more complex strategic composition. What appeared to be a simple corporate contract was, in reality, a carefully designed infiltration mechanism. Each shipping route, each seemingly innocuous equipment transfer was a probe, testing response times, mapping infrastructure, identifying critical vulnerabilities. Consider the technological ecosystem the veterans had cultivated. Retirement communities that looked like peaceful suburban developments were, in fact, distributed research and development centers. Community workshops became advanced fabrication facilities. Local computer networks transformed into redundant communication systems that could survive multiple points of failure. The Zakharal's first critical mistake was underestimating the human capacity for networked collaboration. Where most species saw retirement as an individual experience, humans viewed it as a collective opportunity. Each veteran brought a unique skill set. Engineers who could redesign weapon systems over weekend barbecues, medical professionals who understood biological warfare at a molecular level, communication specialists who could turn local internet networks into untraceable communication grids. Their preparation was multifaceted and sublime in its complexity. Take, for instance, their approach to technological adaptation. Most galactic species viewed technology as a linear progression, each generation building incrementally on the last. Humans saw technology as a malleable construct, something to be constantly reimagined, repurposed, weaponized. A retired aerospace engineer wouldn't simply stop designing after leaving official service. They would instead find new, more interesting ways to apply their knowledge. A community center workshop might look like a place for woodworking and basic metal craft. In reality, it was a sophisticated prototyping center, where advanced materials were tested, weapon concepts were refined, and innovative solutions were developed. The Zakharal intelligence reports completely missed the underlying dynamic. They saw individual veterans, not the interconnected network they represented. Each veteran was a node in a living, breathing system of collective capability. Their technological ecosystem was a marvel of distributed innovation. Open-source design platforms allowed rapid knowledge transfer. Crowd-funded research initiatives meant that cutting-edge concepts could be developed outside traditional institutional frameworks. What appeared to be hobby groups were, in fact, specialized development cells focused on specific technological challenges. The military-industrial complex hadn't disappeared for these veterans. It had simply decentralized. Parallel development became their strategic advantage. While traditional military research followed linear, hierarchical models, these veterans worked in a rhizomatic structure, multiple points of innovation happening simultaneously, cross-pollinating ideas, rapidly iterating on concepts. Their preparation extended beyond pure technology. They understood that modern conflict was as much about information and psychological warfare as it was about physical confrontation. Communication networks were established, intelligence-gathering mechanisms put in place, diplomatic back-channels mapped and maintained. Each veteran brought something unique to this collective effort. A retired communication specialist might develop encrypted communication protocols. A former logistics expert would design supply chain resilience strategies. A medical professional would analyze potential biological and environmental warfare scenarios. The Zakharal continued their bureaucratic dance, generating reports, counter-reports, and meta-reports about their reports. Entire forests, or their galactic equivalents, were sacrificed to the god of administrative documentation. Their technological development wasn't just about creating new weapons or systems. It was about understanding and exploiting systemic vulnerabilities. They didn't just think about direct confrontation. They thought about comprehensive system disruption. A retired cybersecurity expert might develop communication jamming technologies that could be deployed from seemingly innocuous civilian infrastructure. A former aerospace engineer could design drone systems that looked like recreational devices, but could be rapidly converted for reconnaissance or targeted intervention. The community support structure was equally impressive. These weren't just former soldiers maintaining contact. They were an organic, adaptive network that could mobilize resources with remarkable speed and precision. Local support groups, community centers, veterans associations, each was a potential mobilization point, a node in a larger, more complex system. Funding wasn't a challenge. Years of service, strategic investments, and a culture that valued continuous learning meant these veterans had significant financial resources. Crowdfunding, private investments, and innovative financial mechanisms allowed them to develop technologies outside traditional governmental oversight. Their preparation was a masterclass in asymmetric capability development. Traditional military thinking suggested that retirement meant reduced capability. For these veterans, it meant unrestricted innovation. The Zakharal continued their bureaucratic deliberations, generating reports so dense they could potentially be used as structural materials. Committees were formed, subcommittees established, cross-referencing protocols developed. They remained blissfully unaware of the storm gathering just beyond their perception. The veterans weren't just preparing for a potential conflict, they were reimagining the entire concept of conflict itself. And the Zakharal hegemony was about to receive a comprehensive demonstration of what human retirement truly meant. Conflict, in its purest form, is rarely about the immediate confrontation. It's about the moments leading up to that confrontation, the intricate dance of preparation, anticipation, and strategic positioning. The human veterans had transformed this dance into a sublime art form that would make classical military strategists weep with both terror and admiration. The Zakharal's first indication that something was fundamentally wrong came not with a bang, but with a series of increasingly perplexing systematic anomalies. Communication networks experienced inexplicable routing modifications. Supply chains developed mysterious inefficiencies that defied conventional logic. Critical infrastructure began to display behavioral patterns that existed just beyond the realm of statistical probability. It was as if the entire galactic administrative system had developed a form of institutional neurosis. What the Zakharal failed to comprehend was the true nature of the veterans' approach. This wasn't a traditional military intervention. It was a comprehensive systems exploit, a method of conflict that rendered traditional military doctrine as obsolete as a carrier pigeon in the age of quantum communication. A leased AI just to understand its basic configuration. What began as minor signal degradations quickly escalated into a complete systemic breakdown that defied conventional troubleshooting. Entire administrative sectors found themselves cut off, their communication channels rerouted through seemingly impossible pathways. Data streams became labyrinthine, routing information through civilian networks, commercial satellites, and infrastructure that shouldn't have been capable of supporting such complex communication protocols. It was digital warfare conducted with the precision of a master surgeon and the creativity of a performance artist. The veterans had spent years mapping the Zakaral's infrastructural vulnerabilities, not through direct military intelligence gathering, but through the kind of patient, methodical research that most species would consider obsessive. Community workshops, seemingly innocuous technology clubs, retired engineering groups, each was a node in a vast, distributed intelligence network. Their approach was fundamentally different from traditional military thinking. They weren't seeking to destroy the Zakaral infrastructure. They were systematically demonstrating its inherent fragility. Every communication disruption was a precisely calculated message. Every infrastructure anomaly was a demonstration of capability. They weren't just attacking, they were teaching a lesson about the nature of modern conflict. The Zakaral response was, predictably, bureaucratic. Committees were formed, subcommittees were established. Reporting structures were created to analyze the reporting structures that would analyze the initial reports. It was bureaucracy as a form of recursive performance art. Meanwhile, the veterans continued their systematic deconstruction. Power grids experienced unexplained fluctuations. Navigation systems developed curious routing anomalies. Communication networks began behaving with a level of unpredictability that suggested either catastrophic system failure or an intelligence far beyond conventional understanding. What made their approach truly terrifying was its precision. These weren't random attacks. They were carefully orchestrated demonstrations of systemic vulnerability. Each disruption was a surgical strike, not of physical destruction, but of institutional confidence. The veterans understood a fundamental truth that the Zakaral had forgotten. In an interconnected galactic society, true power resided not in military might, but in the ability to manipulate complex systems. Their preparation had been comprehensive. Decades of service, combined with a culture that valued continuous learning and adaptation, had created a network of individuals who could transform any environment into a potential strategic platform. A retired telecommunications engineer could turn a community internet network into an encrypted communication grid. A former logistics specialist could redesign supply chain infrastructures to create strategic vulnerabilities. A medical professional could understand biological and environmental warfare at a molecular level. The Zakaral continued their bureaucratic dance, generating reports so dense they could potentially be used as structural materials. Entire administrative sectors were dedicated to understanding the inexplicable systemic disruptions. They remained blissfully unaware that they were participating in an elaborate demonstration. The culmination came not with a traditional military confrontation, but with a comprehensive systems collapse that exposed the fundamental fragility of the Zakaral administrative infrastructure. Communication networks became unreliable. Supply chains developed mysterious inefficiencies. Critical infrastructure began to display behavioral patterns that existed just beyond the realm of statistical probability. It was a masterclass in asymmetric conflict. The veterans weren't seeking traditional victory. They were demonstrating a fundamental truth about the nature of modern conflict. The true power resides in the ability to understand and manipulate complex systems. Their message was clear. Retirement didn't mean obsolescence. It meant unrestricted innovation. The Zakaral diplomatic corps would later attempt to frame this as a misunderstanding or a technological anomaly. Official reports would be generated, cross-referenced, and filed in triplicate. Committees would be formed to study the incident, subcommittees established to analyze those committees. But the veterans had made their point. In the grand theater of galactic politics, they had demonstrated that human retirement was nothing more than a change of operational context. Where most species saw the conclusion of a military career as a time of diminished capability, humans saw it as an opportunity for unrestricted strategic reimagination. The final irony was not lost on those who understood the deeper implications. The Zakharal had attempted to manage and control human veterans through bureaucratic mechanisms. Instead, they had provided them with the ultimate training ground, a complex, interconnected system just waiting to be systematically dismantled. Retirement, for these humans, was turning out to be their most active posting yet. And the Zakharal hegemony would never look at a community center the same way again.